everyone, and welcome to episode 76 of the Impulso podcast by Momentum Works. So today we're going to actually be talking about Starbucks and Luckin Coffee because both of them recently released their financials for Q1 2024. And coffee is an industry that we look at a lot, right? And because of this, we've actually launched a coffee report, and we also have our Sip, Innovate, Repeat immersion, which is a coffee immersion. So we thought that we would do a short little podcast today, and we're filming it as well, just to talk about the latest earnings and results.
And to make sure that people know about Sabrina's passion for drinks, she has a cup of bubble tea.
Yes, I was going to buy coffee, but I decided I didn't need coffee today.
How many cups of bubble tea do you consume each day now?
One a day.
One a day?
Maximum. Yeah.
So
minimum is 0.
At the beginning of the year, she had a target of maximum once a week.
Yeah.
Okay. So
didn't work out.
Did you get like daily vouchers from Koi or whatever?
No, I downloaded the Koi app like a month ago. I spent almost $200 there already.
Nice.
But let's not talk about that.
This is where her salary goes. Yeah.
Yes. So on 30th of April, both Starbucks and Luckin Coffee actually released their Q1 earnings. And you can see that the market actually responded quite differently, right?
So we actually charted the performance of both companies in the stock market for the last year, I think. Yeah, so of course, Luckin is still recovering from their fraud. It's still in the pink sheet market. It's over the counter. But I think over the past year, investors have responded quite negatively to Starbucks' performance and prospects. So that has something to do with the consumption power, with the inflation, etc., etc. And I think Luckin seems to be going a wild ride in terms of performance. But of course, I think we can look at actual numbers to see where they are actually focusing on.
So looking in more detail, I think like you said, Starbucks has been having a difficult time, and they actually acknowledged it themselves in their latest earnings call. So their CEO, Laxman Narasimhan, actually mentioned that it was a difficult quarter, but despite this, they remain committed to their disciplined approach to capital allocation as they navigate this complex and dynamic environment. And they also specifically called out China, where in China, their comparable store sales actually declined by 11%, and they credited this to 8% decline in average ticket. So we know that Starbucks is having a pretty difficult past few quarters, right? But of course, Starbucks is a big company. They're a company that's been through a lot since they were started in, how many years ago?
1970s?
Yeah, 1970s. So, Of course, they also have a strategy, right? They are not going to give up so easily. And they've actually introduced this new growth strategy called the triple shot reinvention with 2 pumps.
So obviously, any big company, I think Starbucks has we'll go through that in a bit, more than 38,000 stores across the world. Yep. So it's a fairly large organization, and you do need some simple strategy and values to communicate to your entire team, your investors, as well as the outside world. So we're not going into detail about the triple shot reinvention with 2 pumps, but we just felt that the names are quite apt for the coffee industry.
Yes, if you're curious, I think they talk about it more in their past few earnings calls, so you guys can check those out.
I think what's interesting here is the decline in China. They attribute most of the sort of performance declination to the decline of average ticket, which means that I think the consumers are spending less per order, per drink, whatever, at Starbucks. So
I think this could be because there's a lot of cheaper coffee options in China, right? Luckin Coffee is one. There's also Coty Coffee.
I've been going to China almost every month, actually every month this year, to different cities. So what I do realize is that in some of the smaller cities, you go to Starbucks, it's actually packed. Lots of people, and people still see this. And in small cities, you don't have many Starbucks, right? I went to my hometown, a small city of only 800,000 people. So there are 5 Starbucks. I think each was packed, and you do see the delivery riders coming in and out all the time. So they are pretty busy. But when you go to bigger cities, when you go to places like Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, where there are a lot more Starbucks, and some of them look actually pretty empty to me. But on the side, you do see lots of competition. You have Luckin almost everywhere. Sometimes you have 3 Luckin stores in the same mall. And you do have Coty.
You have Coty. Almost everywhere you see a Luckin, you might see a Coty.
Yes, they have 7,000 or 8,000 stores, so which means that they have been pretty aggressive in store opening, and they have been using the strategy of, okay, you see a Luckin there, that must be a location that Luckin has done some calculation, so I might as well open a store next to it. So all of this, there's Manner, there's Peace, etc., etc. There are lots of players, and many of these players are actually pricing themselves actually cheaper than Starbucks.
KFC as well, right? They have a K coffee. I think they mentioned
I actually kind of like K coffee because, in China, sometimes you travel, right? I mean, you go to weird places, you take high-speed train in the morning, and then you meet friends. I mean, it's actually not that unexpected if you meet a friend or business contact at 11 p.m. for a meeting. And what's the only place that's open? KFC.
Are you drinking coffee at 11 p.m. though?
I am pretty okay with drinking like double espresso at night. But that's the only place which is open. And especially in the morning, if you want to have a decent breakfast, I mean, that's the only place to go.
Makes sense, yeah.
And besides, the coffee is really cheap.
Yes, it's less than 9.9 yuan.
Sometimes, yeah.
So we saw that since last year, Luckin seems to have doubled its store count. So in Q1, they opened about 2,300 stores.
Yep.
And in Q4, they opened almost 1,000 stores a day. So we did a podcast about this earlier this year when Luckin's Q4 results were out.
So they have the capabilities of opening about 1,000 stores a month. And Q1 is expected to be a bit slower because of two reasons, right? First, February is shorter month. And second, that you have the whole week of holiday in Chinese New Year. So it's natural to expect them to be a little bit slower in Q1. But still, I think they have maintained a high speed of store opening. One question related to that, and people might ask, is that, okay, you open so many stores. I mean, do the stores actually make money? And this is something that we're discussing a bit. I think some of the stores are pretty cool, right? I mean,
They're trying out a new concept. So I think we've talked about this quite a lot. Luckin did a collaboration with Moutai last year?
Last year,
last year?
Yeah.
Around mid last year.
Yeah, so they sold like 5 million cups, 5.24 million cups a day.
Yes, and it created a lot of buzz in China, especially on their social media. And of course, they've actually teamed up and opened up a themed Moutai Luckin store, which looks quite nice.
Yeah, they're pretty good at cross-marketing with different brands.
And so, of course, like we said, they've expanded so rapidly, right? But how profitable are their stores actually? So we broke down a couple of numbers.
This is revenue, not profit.
Revenue, yes. So we broke down a couple of numbers based on the number of stores Starbucks and Luckin has globally, as well as more specifically in China. So in China, Starbucks has about 7,000 stores, whereas Luckin has more than 18,000. So it's more than double of Starbucks.
I remember a few years ago, I asked some executive of Starbucks that, I mean, how many stores do you think China would eventually hold for Starbucks? And he said eventually probably 15,000. 15. And I asked him, I mean, what's time horizon for that? He said 10 years. Starbucks is a company which actually plans for the very long term. They have made a plan. And I vaguely remember in that discussion, he said there are two ways to grow Starbucks store count. First is that there are many like small cities where you can have enough people who are affluent and that can support like 2 or 3 Starbucks stores. And many of the cities, you don't have Starbucks yet. So and there are like hundreds of that kind of cities in China. And the second is that, I mean, in large cities, they believe that there are still pockets where they can increase. But obviously, Luckin took a different approach, right? They expand quite aggressively, yeah.
So it's interesting. And we also looked at the revenue in China. So the revenue per store in China as well. So for Starbucks, it's about 99,000 US dollars. And of course, for Luckin, it's about 46,000. So we can see that the revenue for Luckin is still not at the level of Starbucks. But this could be for a variety of reasons, right? I mean, the price is different.
Have you been to a Luckin store in China? It's like most of the stores are bare minimum, right? You have a bar and you have somebody sitting behind, not even a barista, it's like production line worker who's press the buttons and hands you a drink. So Starbucks is more elaborate. You have people who greet you and you have a very nice sitting area, etc., etc. And you have the coffee smell, which you don't necessarily find at Luckin.
And I think Luckin's cost of operations, because of the way their stores formatted, is probably much lower than Starbucks as well, right? Compared to the number of baristas that Starbucks needs to have, Luckin just needs 1, 2 staff maybe for a small store, like a small
I think they
kiosk,
have done calculation for the stores that they calculate, I mean, how many cups of drinks they can sell per half an hour, and they use that to allocate how many staff they need to have at a particular store. I think this is a different philosophy compared to Starbucks. I think we have discussed about that a lot. You can find a lot of literature on our blog. Yeah.
So another thing that we look at when we looked at coffee, which was in our coffee report that you guys can check out, is this Frappuccino Index, right? So, Gianca, do you want to explain a bit about what this Frappuccino Index is?
We use that to measure a couple of things. First is the consumption power in different cities across the world, and the second is the penetration of international brands. So we used the price of
Caramel frappuccino.
Caramel frappuccino. Do you drink that?
Yes, that's the only thing I drink.
That's the only thing?
That's what I drink.
That's
Because
the
you
only
can find
thing
it
what,
everywhere.
from Starbucks?
Yeah.
Okay, do you like it?
Yeah, of course. I drink it like once a week. I should like it.
It's a C drink or it's a D drink?
I'm pretty sure it's a D drink.
I mean, COD is a Singapore Nutri-Grade, which
Grades how much sugar and fat levels
saturated
is in
fat.
the drink.
Yeah. So most of the drinks that people actually like are probably C and D because of the sugar and fat. But anyway, we use this to evaluate. I mean, the two things I mentioned about just now, right? The first is the consumption power, and the second is the penetration of international brands in a local market. So we used the New York City number as the baseline, and you can see that the closer each city is to New York City, and the better penetrated the international brands are in that city, as well as, the better consumption power of the population there, of the average population there compared to the New York City. So we have one city in China in this chart, which is Shanghai. If you just look at this number per se, the methodology you can find in the Coffee in Southeast Asia report that we have. If you look at it, Shanghai is pretty similar to Singapore and pretty similar to Paris. So, but when you look at the GDP per capita, Singapore residents are generally much more affluent compared to residents in Shanghai. So, which means a couple of things. First is that I think even in Shanghai, where things are pretty expensive, it's the biggest industrialized city in China, Starbucks is still relatively premium. So, and then people around us who work for MNCs, who are entrepreneurs themselves, they generally have a bigger consumption power, but it doesn't necessarily represent every single resident of Shanghai. And the second is that, Shanghai's GDP per capita is almost 3 times the national average of China. So which means that, across the nation, people who can afford Starbucks regularly will probably not be that much. So there was also a saying from the former Prime Minister, Li Keqiang, who unfortunately passed away last year. He said that in China there are 600 million people who live on about 1,000 yuan. That's like $130, $140 paycheck per
week, per month.
Per month. Yeah, so which shocked almost everyone that I know, because obviously all the people we know that they're either affluent or they live in big cities, and consumption power is very different compared to national average. So which is probably the reason why Starbucks, which sells their drinks at about 30 yuan per cup, has a limit of how many stores they can open versus Luckin, which sells things at much cheaper.
Do you think that's why we see Luckin being able to expand so quickly as compared to Starbucks? Because their drinks, not just Luckin, but of course Coty Coffee and all the newer coffee stores as well, right? Because they're just generally a lot more affordable to your general consumers across China.
Absolutely. So they're generally more affordable, but that's not the only factor, right? And the other factor is that they need to be able to operate efficiently, because managing tens of thousands of stores, and most of them self-operated, it's not easy.
So, and I think it's interesting because we've mentioned this a couple times before, that China isn't really a big coffee drinking country, right? There isn't a huge coffee drinking culture in China. It's mostly tea and sweet flavored drinks.
I think so. For instance, my mom is in Singapore at the moment. She drinks tea every day. Every morning the first thing she does is that, I went to Hangzhou last week. Somebody gave me this bucket of fresh green tea, just picked this year, and my mom drinks that every day. And you add anything else to the drink, she says it's too much. It's either too sweet or too creamy or whatever. She likes tea pure. But I think young people like sweet stuff.
I think young people, and that's why you see so many. There's so many bubble tea stores in China.
There's so many bubble tea stores in China, yeah.
So I think another thing that a lot of these coffee companies look at when trying to grow their revenue and all is product innovation, right? So
we're quite surprised to see that in earnings calls of Starbucks, the CEO mentioned that they're launching pearls, the first of more texture innovations. And of course, for any Asian here,
that pearls are basically
pearl?
Tapioca flour balls that are in your bubble tea, so they have a very chewy texture.
Do you like it?
Actually, I don't drink pearls.
There's no pearls. Okay.
Yeah, I don't like it because I don't like to chew when I'm drinking things.
She's just too lazy.
Yeah, but it's something that they mentioned that they would be introducing. They actually mentioned in their earnings call that this is something they're going to introduce this summer to test out different textures. But when I did some Googling, I actually found that in the US, they've released this sort of coffee popping pearls. So it's not pearls in the traditional Asian bubble tea sense where it's tapioca, but I think it's more like a coffee jelly. So once you bite into it, it bursts in your mouth.
What with the what?
Coffee flavor. Coffee
Okay.
flavor. And of course, I mean, they also mentioned in their earnings call that one of their lavender series did really, really well, was one of their more successful launches. I don't think this launched in Singapore. I'm not sure where they launched. Maybe only the US.
But I think since they mentioned that in the earnings call, they're probably taking this very seriously. I think Starbucks actually invests quite a bit in R&D. The difference between Starbucks and Luckin in this regard is, I mean, traditionally, Starbucks does like seasonal drinks, right? I mean, every couple of months, it has new things coming up. Some of them are actually something you look forward to because of the season. Some of them are new.
Yes.
But when you look at Luckin, they do have a systematic methodology and sufficient consumer data to allow them to launch new products on a constant basis. Yeah.
Yes. I'm not sure if we mentioned this before, but the way Luckin actually decides how to make a new drink is very interesting, right? Because they don't really look at qualitative data, they look at very quantitative data. So for flavor profiles in their drinks, they number them, and that's how they determine what are the types of drinks that people like.
So it's like a druid or alchemist. You just put like different things, different portions into a soup, and eventually decide what soup tastes nice, and
you
just
see what works.
serve the people. Just to know enough, but.
Yeah. And I mean, it works for them. They released 22 SKUs in just Q1 alone.
Which again says that Q1 is a slow month, right? Because I think last year or the year before they launched like 1,013 SKUs the whole year. So Q1 is still, I think, a relatively slow month. And when we look at the things they have launched, they have orange Americano, a specific kind of orange latte,
cherry blossom latte.
Cherry blossom latte. Sakura latte. Okay, that's fun. And a special kind of tea from Huangshan Mountain, etc. So there are lots of different concepts that they're testing.
Yes. And another thing that when we're talking about product innovation, right? Another thing Zhang Gan also saw when he was in China is, do you want to describe this? I'm sorry for people listening on the podcast, you can't see, but we're looking at boxes of capsule coffees that Luckin actually sells in
supermarkets, and you can buy it on e-commerce. And I was asking my cousin about this. He said he buys from Luckin because this is the most recognizable brand nowadays. And I said,
the supermarket.
No, I mean in general.
Oh, in general.
My cousin doesn't go to the supermarket. He buys everything e-commerce.
Oh, okay.
So I am the boring one who actually went to the supermarket and check out what's on the shelf. So you do have different types of coffee with Luckin brand, and obviously manufactured with different factories across different parts of the country. But yeah, so they do leverage their brand and they do leverage their supply chain to actually expand their production line to other channels rather than their physical stores.
Do you see other coffee companies doing this? So like
everyone does that.
Coffee? Manor Coffee?
I haven't seen Coffee or Manor, but I have seen Tim Hortons. Starbucks does that, obviously. You see that in Singapore, right? And I think I've seen some other smaller, Seesaw Coffee, I think has that as well, which is one of the venture funded brands. So yeah, so I don't think it's that uncommon. Yeah,
it's quite common.
But it's just Luckin does that at a scale.
And of course, I think one thing about Luckin is that because everything goes through their app, right?
Yeah.
They have data on what sells and what doesn't sell.
So you don't need app data to show that what sells. but
it makes it easier.
No, but the app data shows that exactly who is buying what.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So they showed that they have, I mean, of course, we know their coconut milk latte is their best seller. They sold 700 million cups in the past 3 years.
Oh my God, that's how much plastic that is.
Yeah, these are like C or D rating, by the way. I also checked just now when I went to Luckin.
So actually 2 weeks ago, there was this article in China saying that, Luckin's coconut latte, which is their best-selling product in China, is collapsing in Singapore because it's labeled D. But I mean, whoever who wrote the article, you can go and check out what Coca-Cola is labeled.
D.
The orange juices, I think it's D as well. I think most of the drinks that people actually do like are COD.
Yeah.
I think we'll talk about that specifically.
Yes, we had a podcast about this as well because I think it's something Chaji in China, Shanghai is doing. But the what amused me the most about this is actually the orange Americano because, okay, this is the number one drink that I recommend to anyone when they're trying Luckin. I've never tried it, by the way. But
you never tried it?
Not the Luckin one.
But you have tried it?
I've tried it from other stores, but not Luckin. But I always recommend
do you like
this.
It?
I haven't decided.
You haven't decided?
It's an interesting thing. I feel like it's an acquired taste. I haven't acquired the taste.
But apparently people like it. So they
sold 100 million cups in 1 year. Which is now my answer for every time when I recommend this to someone and they ask me who is drinking orange Americano, I will tell them they sold 100 million cups in 1 year.
I think I was speaking with my sister-in-law over the weekend, and she was saying that she actually loves orange Americano because it's just this combination of like the sweet taste and a bit of like orange, like citrus flavor, plus a little bit. I mean, you can hardly feel kind of like coffee, right? So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we are all biased, right? Quite often we see something which is new, we said, okay, who drink that shit? But of course, at the end of the day, I mean, data tells. So for these guys, if it sells, it sells. If it doesn't sell, they will stop it. So
they can just discontinue it.
Doesn't matter, right?
So speaking of the Luckin app, one interesting metric that I think we found from Luckin's past reports is that they actually report their average monthly transacting customers, which is not really a metric we see used by F&B players often, right? It's more often used by tech companies.
I think it's still debatable whether Luckin is an F&B player or an e-commerce company with a physical storefront. And because their cost structure, they try to minimize the rent, they try to minimize the people on the front line, they try to minimize the sitting area, etc., etc. So it feels more like, I mean, a company which has digital touch point with the customers, and the storefront is the fulfillment, like logistics for e-commerce.
That's true, because you can't even order at their storefront. You can only order through the app.
Yeah, so of course they sacrifice, no, they don't sacrifice, but they lose some customers that way. Yeah. But I think it's something they choose to make sure that they're extremely efficient. I think Starbucks is trying to catch up.
Yeah, we see. Starbucks also added this new metric. So they call it the 90-day active Starbucks rewards members. But of course, this number is just in the US. So the thing about Starbucks apps is that it's not the same across different countries. So this is just the number they have for their US, which is 32.8 million active users.
I do think that as Luckin is expanding globally, I think they now have like 32 or 33 stores in Singapore. They are trying to expand to other markets. They will face all these issues, right? I mean, the payment systems. I think Starbucks, the rewards is, I think Starbucks, like the payment card is a store value card, which I think allows them to have one system, but globally you have the different sort of values being stored, which is annoying because people will say that, okay, why would you have the extra like step of topping up spending? But I think for a company of this size with so much history, that digitization will naturally not be as fast as Luckin, which is digital native.
That's true, because I mean they started as traditional offline stores first, right? And now they're trying to digitize. Whereas when Luckin started, they already knew that they wanted to be very app focused.
Yeah. Digital transformation is drastically different compared to, I mean, digital native. Yeah.
And it's very difficult. We have a report about that as well.
Oh my God, we have a report for everything.
But it's interesting that this is a number that Starbucks is reporting as well, right? I think it really shows like their commitment, at least, that they want to let people know that they are trying to provide more touch points, not just offline, but online as well, just to make the experience, I guess, smoother.
I think one thing they can do is probably have a better, like a full-time tech team to actually revamp their app quite more regularly in a way, because quite often, I mean, you have to go to a barista will tell you that, okay, for this app, it doesn't work, you have to do this. And this is an issue which could easily be fixed by tech. But I guess that either their tech team is not big enough or part of that is outsourced, I mean, integrated with somebody else. So that's why they can't evolve so fast. Somebody told me that Luckin, in the early days, at some point in time, they had like 900 engineers for a coffee company.
Yeah. Luckin is a very interesting business model.
It is.
From the way they start and all.
All right.
So thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Impulso podcast. We hope that you guys enjoyed today's topic and that it was fun for everyone because it's a more relatable topic, right? Everybody likes coffee. So if you did like this episode, do like our podcast and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts to stay up to date on the latest happenings and trends in tech, new retail, and the broader digital economy.